I had done 2 IVF cycles the year before at age 42. And what was interesting about that was that, and I really think women need to be careful, especially when they're older, about this. I see this all the time. It is quality, not quantity. Okay. It is absolutely about quality. And I do think that some women, especially with gig laser treatment, you are going to have less eggs. You might have less, but what you do have is going to be healthier. Your body's going to put all its energy into this one, right? But that's all you need. So I wouldn't say cancel the cycle, especially if you're doing gig laser treatment, you're investing in it, keep going because this might be the one.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Tracy Donegan. Today I'm thrilled to welcome Elizabeth Nourse to the podcast. Elizabeth is a true inspiration, having navigated the complex and emotional journey of infertility not once but multiple times. At 43 and a half, she defied the odds and conceived her daughter using laser for fertility. Elizabeth is deeply committed to helping other women on their fertility journeys. Her hard-earned wisdom is sure to resonate with anyone navigating this path. And now I bring you Elizabeth Nourse. Hi everybody, you are very welcome to the next episode of the Tracy Donegan podcast. And today I'm delighted to welcome Elizabeth Nourse, who is coming to us from the East Coast and is going to share some of her journey to becoming pregnant at 43, is it?
43 and a half.
43 and a half, which is quite amazing, really, when we look at kind of fertility statistics. But I'm delighted that we have a happy ending. And Elizabeth, I'd love for you to kind of share a little bit about your background and your interest in light for fertility as well. But we will get to that. But welcome.
Sure, thank you. So no, I was incredibly blessed to be able to have my daughter, and it had been a long road. Infertility is such a really difficult journey. And this wasn't my first round with it. So I have 3 kids, and I had primary infertility with my son. And I struggled for almost 2 years to have him. And so I kind of know both sides of it. And there's so much in emotional difficulty and just challenges with both primary and secondary infertility, and so many different things you can do, but it's a lot, so I'm happy to be here to be able to kind of help and at least share, one experience of somebody who's been through the ringer a little bit more than once.
Absolutely. Yeah. And having so many different, I guess, perspectives on it, because each step of the way in this journey, you're faced with different decisions. Whether to continue, what supplements to take. It's like your brain, again, my personal, your brain is just it's going nonstop because your brain is looking for a solution. It's looking for the silver bullet. So you're constantly being bombarded by, as we spoke earlier, varying levels of information and conflicting levels of information from lots of the experts. So how did you approach decision making? So when you have 2 little ones at home and now you're trying for your third, did you get to the point of thinking maybe we need something missing here that we haven't explored? So what was helpful for you around that decision making and really supporting your own emotional wellness during a very difficult time?
Yeah. So the thing that was most kind of striking for me with infertility is just where it is in terms of the science, in terms of the ecosystem, right? So there's a million people online that are going to give you advice. There's a million products that are going to get sold to you, treatments, different things. It's incredibly overwhelming, and just so much to deal with. But I'm very analytical. I'm very science focused. I like numbers. I like research. And so my thought was very much around kind of this core idea of minimizing regret. So I feel like if you ever read, and you get, not to get too spiritual on you or anything, but like if you actually read about like people at the end of their lives, right? And what do they want to say about their life and who they were as a person and the choices that they made. so many times we regret the things we didn't do, right? Much more than the things we do. And I was very captivated by this idea that 85-year-old Liz was going to look back on this and she was going to make a call on whether or not I did this correctly. And I wanted to help her because I think she's going to be a really nice lady. And
Yeah.
I want 85-year-old Liz to feel really good about the choices that I made. And so looking at this journey, whether it was with the primary infertility of my son or with, this most recent round with my daughter, it was always just with the sense that like, I want to make the best choices I can and feel like I put the right amount into it, not too much, right? Because you can do too much too. You can go crazy that way. But that I would be at peace with the choices that I made. And so it ended up being very much thinking about being creative and open-minded. That, okay, what everybody was telling me wasn't working, month after month, not working. So let me try something else. Let me try this. Let me run it like little experiments and little tests, right? And that mindset, I think, helped so much because then every month, every 2 months, I'd sit there and say, okay, well, my cycle was more regular, or my period was a little thicker, or, oh, I feel healthier, right? Even that, just like I feel healthier with this. And that was kind of the sense of like, well, every month I'm progressing towards the thing that I want, right? But always with that mindset of like, I want to be able to sleep at night knowing that like at the end of the day, if I don't pull this out, like that I at least I did what I could. I did the best I could at the time. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's about, I think for anyone listening, it's like, it's trying to think of, okay, how can I stack the odds in my favor of this, of getting the outcome that I want, but without losing my mind in the process. Right. I think that's, yeah, especially around mental health. So are you happy enough now? Do you feel like 85-year-old Liz will look back and think, yeah, we are, and feel satisfied with your decisions?
I think so. I mean, I was blessed to have a happy ending, right? But there were more things that came out of it that were beautiful, even if that hadn't happened. And so I learned how to be more empathetic, right? I learned to be more sensitive to other people through that journey. I learned that you can add value to others just by being more supportive, right? So because of my experience, I've been privileged to be able to talk to, I don't know, hundreds of women at this point have reached out to me for advice or help. I know of multiple women who've gotten pregnant after talking to me, and that it told me like, hey, what you told me was instrumental in me being here and getting to this point. Women that have chosen to freeze their eggs because of conversations with me. And so I look at that and go like, well, okay, there was a lot of suffering there, but at the same point, like, look at how much there's little people here in the world, and little people that are going to be here because of that pain and because of that struggle. And just specifically about light therapy, the research, when I started digging into it, I was able to buy V-Light for my father, which is like the brain kind of one. Yes. He has Parkinson's. And it literally has been a game changer for him. Like his voice improved. It was to the point where I couldn't understand him on the phone anymore. And with the light therapy, his Parkinson's has improved, right? And he has slowed the progression, and I can understand him on the phone again. And that's just, again, something that came out of it. So there's, even if you don't have success or you don't get what you think you want, right? There's other things that can come out of it that are like healthy and really good for you and good for the world. And so I do think like I'm happy with it. Obviously I got a good result, but there were other things that came too,
Yeah, and it's I know some other people using the V-Light as well and really having like really impressive results with it as well. So I'm like personally so excited about where this technology is going and where the science is going with it, for all kinds of things. I like, just for an example, we have a sick dog at the moment, and we have our own light therapy, we have our products at home, but we found a local vet that does
Yep.
laser. So I was like, okay, you do laser or you do LEDs? Like, well, there's LEDs, but it's mostly laser. I'm like, sign us up. Saw them yesterday. They gave us our equipment to take home. And, well, let's just say the dog is doing a lot better. And that was only, like, she had like 3 treatments yesterday. And a lot better to like wake up at 4:15 this morning to want to go out in the yard. So I'm like, yeah, this I think she's feeling a bit better. Yeah, I wasn't thrilled getting up at 4:15, but yeah, but the dog is doing great. So I think back on, I guess, your most recent experience, what helped you? What helped your mindset? You know, that metaphor of the roller coaster, like you're up and down. I think for when you've been dealing with fertility challenge, I think it is almost the closest experience. Now, I don't think I've ever been clinically insane, but I think it must be the closest experience to almost losing your mind. Yes. When you are so immersed in this, because you cannot see the forest from the trees. All you can see is that end game of, I have a baby in my arms and really nothing else matters. And what happens is relationships suffer, your self-esteem suffers, like your whole identity can suffer. Ready to meet your baby sooner? At Solasta in Round Rock, Texas, we specialize in laser therapy for fertility. This safe, therapeutic laser treatment improves egg quality, balances hormones, and helps create a richer uterine lining for implantation. So whether you're trying to conceive naturally or need support for your next IVF cycle, our personalized protocols and treatments are designed to optimize your chances of success. If you're ready to take the next step, visit us at solasta.health to schedule your consultation. At Solasta, we're here to light the way on your path to parenthood. What helped you navigate all of the really tricky emotions that come along with this kind of journey?
So that's, I think, the actual heart of it, because if you can work on the mental health part of it, you can endure longer, maybe make better decisions, like help your chance of success. But I think the mental part is actually the absolute heart of infertility. With primary infertility, with what I had with my son, you know, I think the mental space there is you had this vision of your life, right? This vision of being a mother. And you don't know if you're going to get that, right? And you might have, from the time you were a little girl like me, I always knew I wanted kids. I knew I wanted a family. In fact, I knew specifically I wanted 3. And where that comes from, who's to say? But it was always there, you know? And then you get immediately kind of thrown into the deep end of that. Maybe that isn't my life. Maybe that's not for me. Maybe that's not what's going to happen. And this entire path that you thought you were on starts to just fade, right? And the dread and the fear, and it's just so horrible, because every month you're re-traumatizing yourself. You get to the end of the month and you don't want to go to the bathroom. Why? Because you're going to see blood, and it's going to be another failure, right? And you're going to have to just sit with that. And the vacations that get wrecked because your period comes on day 4 of the vacation, or, you know, you thought you were and you could kind of feel something, but then you weren't, or your best friend tells you she's pregnant and you're not. And there's babies everywhere once you want one. And it's the loss that nobody sees, because it's the person who doesn't exist, right? And so it doesn't get recognized, and you just feel broken, or at least I did. You know, you walk around and you feel like I was designed to do a thing that I can't do, and you're broken. And it's incredibly, incredibly difficult. And I was lucky enough to work through that. But after almost 2 years of struggling to have my son, you know, you just sit there and go like, well, what's the point of my life? Really? What's the point if I can't be this thing? Because kids are like the easy button for purpose, right? Like you know, I have kids. Well, then there's a reason for me to be here, and there's a life story I can tell. But the minute you take that away, well, then what exactly is it you're going to do with yourself? There's a lot there to unpack. And I think the sympathy thing, probably the most useful thing for me, was just thinking about myself in the third person. Is If this was my friend, what would I tell
Yes.
her? If this was my best friend, what would I say to her? What would I want her to do? How would I support her? Because we're so hard on ourselves, right? Especially when you're not getting what you want in infertility. But I would turn it around and say, like, if Liz was like my best friend, she would go out and she would go have that beer and she'd have that piece of cheesecake and she'd, because her period came again and it was rough, and she would go take that walk, and I would think about it like that, because otherwise I wouldn't treat myself as well as maybe I should have, and
Yeah.
that little mental hack of just, can you see yourself the way other people probably see you? It was really helpful to be more forgiving and to be more kind to myself during it's hell on earth. It really is. Um, so primary is hard, but then secondary infertility, that one's really hard too. And I can't say, having been through both, which one's worse, because secondary, you can't escape the moms because you're one of them. And you don't get the same amount of sympathy, because everybody's like, well, you already have one or you already have two, but they don't realize that, like, this isn't, you're still not getting what it is your life vision was, right? And then on top of it, with secondary, you know exactly what you're missing. You know exactly what you don't have, because every little snuggle from your daughter is the last snuggle. Or she asks you, where is the sister I want? I want a sister. And when your 7-year-old comes to you and says, I want a baby sister, can you? And you've been trying, right? And you don't know if you can do that, you're going to go cry. Like at the end of the day, you're just going to have to let that out, because it's that hard. And so with secondary, you have this legitimacy thing where everybody says, well, you should be happy anyway.
Yeah.
And then you also just know what the loss is. You just feel it all the time, because you know how big it is, that you don't have this other person that's not there. So
Yeah.
the mental thing of just being careful with yourself and finding support and finding things that allow you to just sit with it sometimes and say, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be
Yeah.
upset. Like, it's just huge. It's so
It
heavy.
is. And it's just not recognized within this fertility industry. Well, I call it an industry because that's the way I see it. It's not, it's like, oh, the whole, oh, just relax, and I was like, because I remember my own experience. Oh, if you just relax, if you just, go away for a weekend, have a glass of wine. And I'm like, that's the last thing someone that's struggling with fertility ever wants to hear.
Yeah.
When we were emailing earlier, and I was so I had created an app called Fertile Mind, because when I looked out there, and I was like, there's nothing out there there's a million apps that will track your cycle there, and you can track your medications, but I thought, but what about like me? Like, how could I support myself dealing with literally this insanity, to help me kind of try and stay the course? And when I did my mindfulness, when I did my master's, there was a module in it, a self-compassion module. And that for me was just, that was just light bulbs going off everywhere. I thought, can you talk to yourself the way you would talk to this baby that you want to have? So if you were talking to your baby now, you would not berate it and blame, because there's so much blame and shame on this journey. That how can I help women and their partners get a little bit more balance and become less reactive when you see the moms walking down the streets with the strollers, and you're an outsider to that, especially when you're trying for your first. And I remember seeing research on looking at like the number of women who were, just the fact that they were starting maybe their first IVF, that so many of these women were already coming into this with having some mild to moderate mental health issues that were not, so they are about to get on this roller coaster with no preparation for what is coming, no way to support themselves. But then what I thought was fascinating was this research, and which has again been replicated, to show that if women are getting this emotional support and they're getting, or counseling, whatever they're getting, but they're getting mental health support, they're more likely to continue their IVF, even if money is no object, because it's financially, it can be really, really difficult. But even when they looked at women who had no financial issues about continuing IVF, that they were making a decision to stop because of the emotional burden of this journey. And I'm like, okay, so I automatically thought, oh, well, they're missing out on opportunities, because that old brain has just now gotten so caught up with this that we can't even think straight, because your executive functioning is just offline. So how can we bring that executive functioning back online so that these women can make a decision from a place of centeredness and groundedness, so that there's no regrets? Because your life could look very different 2 years, 3 years down the line, and I wanted women to have no regrets, but at least let's give women some tools to deal with this journey that can help them sit in the journey. And it ties back into the Buddhist philosophy of, life in general. We get a lot of what we don't want. We don't get what we do want. And that's just life, but how can we, find a way to be okay with that and to be kind to ourselves? Because I think as women, we're so hard on ourselves. And, you're thinking to yourself, I can't get pregnant, so I shouldn't have had those 4 tequilas when I was 25 in Cancun. And we go through and blame, and bringing that self-compassion and forgiveness, and being able to just not keep that loop going in our head is just so important for women.
It's huge. And it's the thing that there was kind of two things. So just that compassion, bringing that forward, that if this was a friend, you would just be so supportive and so helpful and so sympathetic. This is you, right? So you need to pull that from yourself, because you know how you would treat that person if that was a person in your life. But it's also just the courage to kind of sit with it. And one time this is where I kind of learned this, or at least the epiphany for me was I was touring one of these huge Mayan ruins in Mexico, and it was 104 degrees, and it was the only day we're going to be there, Chichen Itza. And I was there with my kids and my husband, and it was just insanely hot, right? Insanely hot. And I thought to myself, okay, this is the one day in my life I'm probably going to be here at Chichen Itza. This is an amazing site. It's fantastic. And it's hot as hell, And I could either be miserable today, and I could just let this heat just absolutely ruin it, or I could say, there's no way out. It's just going to be hot. It's going to be hot. It's going to be hot. You are going to feel hot right now, and there is no way, there's no amount of water, fans, or anything that's going to do anything for you. It's going to be hot. It's going to be hot the whole day, but then it'll be over. And I was able to kind of get there in my head, where I was like, I'm not going to let this take away this amazing place that I'm in right now. And I go back to that a lot. I went back to that with infertility, because it's literally it is going to hurt. If you are a normal person, it's going to hurt you. It's going to feel bad. That's okay. It's not going to be like that forever. It's going to pass, right? And every cycle isn't so important, right? It's a process. It's a process of learning. It's a process of growing. It's a process of testing, so that you take down the pressure of every cycle, especially when you're older, right? And everyone feels like it's just so critical. That sense of it's okay. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. But every single time you're working on it, you're learning things, you're getting better, and it's okay. And that's kind of how I went through it. And that's the only reason, because when I add it all up, it's 4.5 years of my life in some variety of infertility, right? So that's a lot of cycles. And so you do. I think, at least for me, just learning to be like, that's just part of what this stage of my life is. This is this chapter, and I don't know how the chapter ends, but this is part of the chapter, and just kind of sitting with it and
Yeah.
just recognizing it.
And I go back that idea that, everything is temporary. That when you're in the middle of it, though, it doesn't feel like that. It
Oh
just
no,
feels like
no.
you cannot, you literally cannot see the light at the end of the tunnel because the emotions are so intense. And then then if you are doing medication on top of things, that just adds to it.
Oh
And
yeah,
then
yeah.
yeah, you feel like it's never going to change. And I would, when I'm working with women, I would say to them, like, remember, like, think of a time, a couple of years ago when you were, something really stressful happened, and at that moment you thought, this is how it is,
Right.
and this is my life, and this is, and that is, yeah, that's really difficult to, especially if it, something like grief, that this is, I'm in this now, and this isn't my life, and but that remembering that it is, everything is temporary, but also remembering, but that includes the good stuff and the not so good stuff. So it makes you appreciate the good things, even when, like when you're in Mexico, it's like, yeah, we're going to get baked alive here,
Yeah.
but look at where we are, and finding those little moments of nuggets that we can find to focus on what's going right in
Right.
this moment instead
Yeah,
of
don't let it wreck years and years of your life. And that's easy to say, hard to do. But
it
don't let
is.
it take more than it should, right? It can cost different amounts. And the more you focus on your mental health, you can lower the cost of this a little bit. You're
Yeah.
gonna pay, but like it doesn't have to be so expensive that it eats all of the joy.
Yeah.
Because it can for some people, it's that consuming. One of the other things that was really helpful for me was I wrote a little thing, little paper that's like got a few paragraphs on it of like my best self, like who do I want to be? What am I trying to achieve? Where do I want to put my energy? And during the thick of it, and during the pandemic as well, like I just read it every day just to remind myself, like, this is who I'm trying to be in the world. I want to be compassionate. I want to be a role model. I want to be a strong person. I want to be those things. And it's a lot to remember that sometimes when you're in the really dark places. And for me, just having that written thing, was really helpful to just go through and be like, okay, this is who I am. This is who I want to be in the world. And you are the person. Every day you can be that person you want to be, right? So like if you want to be kind, you're kind, right? And then you are that thing that you want to be.
Yeah.
So I don't know, for me, I think just being able to sit with it, learning more about compassion, self-compassion, and then having these tricks like, every month isn't so critical despite what they tell you, and every day you can remind yourself who you want to be in the world. And it doesn't matter, pregnant, not pregnant, you still have a goal of like who you're trying to be, right? And that's
Yeah.
probably a really compassionate, kind person for a lot of people, right? So do that for yourself.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, I really love that. It's a really nice exercise, I think, for women to sit down with, and because I think part of the fertility treadmill is the doing, and I think so few women really sit down and make space for all of this instead of, because I think I know I probably did this as well with when we were struggling with our first, was that it was that emotional, it was bypass. It was like, I don't have time for the anger and that,
Right,
but it made itself known whether I had time for it or not,
right.
so it's, you can push them all down, and but until you find a way to relate to those thoughts and those emotions in a more healthier way, they will come back to bite you even
Yes.
more powerfully than they would have had we, let them come and go and not stop to entertain every negative thought that we had. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience with light, and like where did that come from? Because it's not something that most women who are struggling with fertility challenges ever even hear of. Well, hopefully they will, after this, and I think it's gaining popularity. But yeah, I'd love to hear where you heard about it and what inspired you to try it.
Yeah, so I was lucky to you know, experience many different doctors in the process of infertility. And the fourth doctor that I went to, and every one of them had their, pros and cons, but very different approaches. And if I could say anything to women deep in this process, get multiple opinions. Nobody has all the answers. Even just the most basic tests were completely different from one doctor to another. It is just, this profession is not at the point where anyone has all the answers. It's very far removed, although they'll act like it because they feel more comfortable, right? Pretending that they have all the answers. And maybe that's what the patient, wants to feel. But the fact is that you can go, in my case, I think I saw 7 doctors total, 4 of which were reproductive endocrinologists, and every single one of them was incredibly different. And some of them caught things that other ones didn't. So the second doctor caught a whole bunch of stuff that the first doctor never tested for. And I wasted a year plus at age 41, which is a very valuable year, right? If you know about fertility, because I had a undiagnosed bacterial infection that didn't get tested. And so you just go, okay, all right, if I'd shopped around a little bit earlier, I might have been able to avoid that particular one. And so getting those multiple opinions is huge. The fourth doctor that I went to, which I'll just for reference was CNY out of New York, but they have different locations. I picked them because they're very affordable relative to other reproductive endocrinologists for IVF treatment. And so within the DC region where I live, IVF is running currently $25,000 to $30,000 a treatment. Okay, it's real hard to be zen when you're spending $30,000 on a cycle, right? And I knew myself, and I knew that I couldn't handle the stress of that. Like, the money was so much to put on one cycle, and the idea, the terror of that not working when you spent $30,000. And when you get the stats and you're like, oh, well, you've got like a success rate of 5% at your age. Well, then how do you even justify that? It feels like lighting your money on fire. So I went to CNY because I read that they were like the most affordable in the US, and it's true. Their pricing is vastly better than most places, and they do this huge remote thing, so you can work with somebody local in your city or whatever, get your scans, get your treatments, light treatment, whatever it is you're doing, and then go up there for the IVF process. And it's a real way to save money. For me, it was huge because it meant I could do more than one cycle. It took the pressure off that, like, oh, if my cycle's only whatever it was, 8,000 or something, including meds, then that's still real expensive, but it's different than a $30,000 cycle, right?
Yeah.
So when I was on their site and I was researching, and I liked kind of how open-minded they were about stuff, they have a paragraph or two about light therapy, and there were some interesting studies about light therapy, and I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll just dig into that. And then I read the Oshiro study, and I read the study, the Anne Grinstead study or whatever about using the Giga laser. And I was blown away because I thought, oh my God, this is actually my thing. Like, I have had 2 kids before. I have done a lot of tests. Everybody just said this is age related. In your case, it's age, it's age, it's age, it's age. So what is aging? It's your mitochondria having less energy. The battery in your little flashlight, is dying. There's nothing wrong with the flashlight, but the battery in my case was losing it, right? And I thought, oh gosh, this actually hits the thing that I have. I've never seen anything. There's some supplements, there's some things you can take, but there's nothing that actively energizes mitochondria, but this seems to. And that for me was like kind of a game changer, because I finally found something as an aging woman that seemed like it addressed the principal thing that I had. And again, I know the science isn't there. We don't have the amount of studies. We don't, in 10 years or 15 or 20 years, I'm sure there will be. But I don't have that to wait. I have to make decisions now based on the information I have now. And what I saw was worth trying, you know? And the first treatment I did with the Giga laser, I'm very lucky to be close to a facility, hour, 15 minutes away, that actually has the most powerful laser that was used in the Grinstead study. And the very first treatment, I could just feel it. I could feel it all the way through to my backbone. I knew that it just felt energized. I felt calm. I felt warmth. And I went home and I just slept for like 4 hours. Like I just felt so, like my body was just like, you know, and that was amazing. Like it just was different. And I could tell that after those first couple treatments, my period was a lot thicker than it had been. And that's just anecdotal, but at the same point, like these are the data points you have. Like I'd had bad lining, and suddenly it was more like what the lining was in my 20s. And I went, oh, this really did something. Like this legit did something. This was my heaviest period I've had in like 8 years. Wow. Okay. And then I got FSH numbers were better. And I thought, okay, wow, this is, my FSH had been 11, and I think it went down to 4 or 7 or something. But it was like, wow, okay, you know, like this. I even have blood work that shows like this actually did something. And that's when I decided, like, okay, I'll give it one more go.
And so how many sessions did you do in total with the Giga laser?
I think I did 4 the month before I started my last IVF cycle. I had done 2 IVF cycles the year before at age 42. And what was interesting about that was that, and I really think women need to be careful, especially when they're older, about this. I see this all the time. It is quality, not quantity. Okay? It is absolutely about quality. And I do think that some women, especially with Giga laser treatment, you are going to have less eggs. You might have less, but what you do have is going to be healthier. And I knew this kind of anecdotally because, or just through my one sample, because my first IVF treatment, I had 5 that fertilized when I was 42. And I had 2 that were able to be PG tested, BGG tested, and they were both abnormal. The second cycle I did right after, I had 10 eggs. None of them were strong enough to be tested. 5 of them fertilized, so the fertilization rate was much lower. And then none of them were strong enough to even be tested. So I knew kind of like, well, you would think like the 10 egg cycle was better, but actually looking at quality, it was far inferior to the other cycle. But I hadn't discovered light therapy at that point. So then I, kind of had sort of given up. It was sort of trying still at home. When I discovered the light therapy, I thought, well, the odds are pretty good that I'm one of those, especially at 43 and a half, right? I'm not going to be able to create a lot of eggs. I shouldn't even expect that. I just need one good one. That's all I need. Just one good one. So they actually said, do you want to cancel your cycle? Because I had three follicles. And I remember thinking, no, I don't want to, because I don't think I can do much better. And I'm not convinced that more eggs is actually better in my case. In fact, it might be worse. And it was no one tells you this. Everyone thinks, oh, it's number of follicles, number of eggs, right? But when you're older and when you're doing this kind of treatment, some women do not create a lot of eggs. Some women are not capable of it because you're a little bit older. Your body's going to put all its energy into this one, right? But that's all you need. So I wouldn't say cancel the cycle, especially if you're doing Giga laser treatment, you're investing in it. Keep going, because this might be the one. And by the way, I also did a low stim protocol. I didn't think any more meds were going to help me, right? Like there wasn't any magic sauce that was going to get me to 20 eggs anyway. So like, what was the point of drugging them all up that much, right? So I would just say that, like with the laser therapy, with juicing it, that you got to change your mindset a little bit and think about quality. And so I did 4 before, and then I had this, period, which was more like when I was younger. And then I did basically every other day, giga laser treatment until retrieval. And I made sure to do it the day before retrieval so that they were very, energized, right? And they were very nice at the facility I went to and let me do it even on a Sunday because the retrieval was on Monday. And that was so nice of them to open it up and let me do that. And then I did, I think 2 afterwards because I was doing a fresh cycle. I did 2 after that to help with healing after the IVF and to help with the lining. And then when I came in for the fresh transfer on day 4 or whatever afterwards, they said, well, this lining's amazing. This is like perfect. And I had been at 5 and they're like, this is like 9 or 10. This is amazing. This is perfect lining. And I'm like, great. And again, that had not happened to me. That was the light treatment for sure. That had never, even when I was 32, I never had great lining. So what a thing, right? Just to see again and again, like evidence that like this has so many therapeutic benefits that need to be studied. But in my case, like just the evidence just kept piling in. Like this is doing something. This is moving in the right direction, even with less eggs. Like that's the big thing.
It's not all in your head, the like you're hearing from the clinic that, wow, something's changed here. And
right.
Yeah.
Right. Just because your numbers, your FSH is and and then it dropped. And then you look at it and go, oh, okay, my lining was 5 and now it's 9.5. Like these are things that are real, that make a huge difference. So the treatment is really, for me, I think what absolutely pushed it over the edge. But there were a lot of lifestyle things and other things I did as well that I think supported the success at the age that I was at. But certainly I think the gig laser was the biggest part.
And for someone who is unfamiliar with the giga laser, like, where is the light shone? Is it because I guess some people do the abdomen and then they do the sacrum as well and the neck, and so what was your protocol, I guess?
So my thought, again, because I'm just a super analytical person, was to copy the study done by Grinstead as much as I possibly could. So they were using the giga laser, I think it's level 6. It's a 22-minute, I think, cycle or treatment. I have a uterus that tipped back after I had my son, backwards. So my thought was that I would also benefit from a treatment on my back as well, just because, again, my uterus tips the other way, which is a normal variation, but it's just one that I have. So what I would do is I would do level 6 on the front, just on my lower abdomen, make sure that I'm getting everything I can, right? And then the last few treatments, I actually flipped over and did, I think, level 4 on my back a few times. But I didn't do that the whole time. And that was just a personal decision, especially for the lining, that like I wanted to make sure I was reaching deep enough. And I think that's a really important thing that most women looking at light therapy for infertility need to understand. They need to understand that there are a million devices on Amazon that do nothing. Okay?
Yeah.
It is full of fraud. There are red colored light bulbs that do absolutely nothing that they're happy to sell you on for $170 that are complete crap. And it is heartbreaking to me, the amount of women who spend time and effort and money buying things that have no evidence of working whatsoever. While the wavelength of the light that you're working with is important, by far the most important thing is the power of the light that you're using. Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, 630 and 820 and whatever light wavelengths are studied, great. Make sure you're kind of in that range. But the fact is, nobody knows for sure which wavelengths in these ranges are the most useful. Red and infrared probably need a mix, but nobody knows for sure because the studies just don't exist. So be very cautious, incredibly cautious about what lights you're picking, and understand that there's a huge difference between a panel that you use at home or a little light that you use at home, or the depth of penetration is millimeters. Now, it might help you with inflammation. It's going to help with calmness. It might help your skin a lot. I actually use a light panel. I find it very helpful and calming and soothing and healthy. But I was under no illusions that that was somehow going to reach my eggs. Okay, those are very deep, very deep in there. Depending on your body size, it could be really deep in there.
Yes.
You need a powerful light that can actually make it through to energize the mitochondria of the egg itself. And that's when you're getting into low-level laser therapy. That's when you're getting into either the GigaLaser or a 3D rated laser handheld unit, which you can use, okay? And so if you don't happen to be near a practitioner, you can't get to a practitioner that has this larger panel, right, that can be very powerful, then you can rent a handheld unit and you can learn how to use that. And you might have a chance, especially if you aim it in the right direction, this is key, you have a chance of energizing your eggs that way directly. But I think there needs to be much more awareness on the part of women that this is an area that's rife with fraud, frankly. There's so many people talking about light therapy using units that have no ability to do anything that they're talking about, and it's a tragedy. And they're making money off of it. And that is to me one of the absolute saddest aspects of this. I don't have any commercial interest whatsoever in any of this, but just to watch the amount of people wasting time and money and energy on something that is not, you might as well just put red construction paper in front of a light bulb and act like that's a thing, because it's not effective. It's not going to do what you think it's going to do. It's sad.
And and especially in this, when you're dealing with this, you will sell your soul, literally, for an answer or something that's close to an answer. You spend so much time looking for that silver bullet, and anything that has an inkling that, I haven't tried that yet, and I agree that the snake oil remedies for when it comes to fertility are just, I have a hard time just scrolling on by some of the stuff that's out there. It was and just I think for women to understand there's so many variables when it comes to light therapy, like just even the shape of your body, especially with people using like a panel. It's like the research is quite clear that the closer we can get to the skin, if not kind of contact with the skin, the better. And people are standing 12 inches or away from a panel, and they're expecting that it's going to have all these miraculous changes. Now, I have a panel myself, and I'm not using it as much now because I have kind of recognized that I need to get more daylight. The weather will change in Texas in the next couple of weeks, and I'll probably be using it a little bit more. But I think understanding there's so many variables, because we will see like discussions about, why isn't it working, and it's, and it feels like it's, especially at the moment in the whole light therapy business, it's kind of like the Wild West. Mm-hmm. Where the FDA have said, okay, so we will approve, red light therapy for it's anti-inflammatory or modulates inflammation, or maybe a muscle soreness. Like there's only a couple of things, but when you see some of the claims on the websites and even some of the products they're not even giving you specs that you can use. Like there was one recently, some company was claiming to have, I think it was like 70,000 milliwatts of power, and I'm like, what? So if we're looking at, well, what's the milliwatts per square centimeter, that I can use, but just these random numbers that are just, I'm like, yeah.
Well, they're not rated, so that's the part too. And it's like there's no one verifying that, right? So like, it's not like so many other things where there are consumer protections. Like there's just none here. So I got a book. It was like Red Light Therapy by Ari Whitten. Yeah, it was very helpful to just understand the differences between the panels and like what, so many people are buying things that have zero power associated with them, and they're not going to do anything. And there might be a placebo effect, which, hey, you know what? If there is an effect, then it helps you, great, but in terms of fertility, you have limited time, you have limited resources, it is very expensive. in my mind, you need to do everything you can to do it intelligently and think about it like tests. And is my period getting more regular? Is my cycle getting more regular? Is it getting thicker, more like when I was younger? Is it, I feel healthier, I have less inflammation, I notice my weight isn't doing this, my PMS symptoms are getting better. Like, there's all these things that you can look at and say, yes, I'm getting healthier, right? I can see that this has an impact, whether it's taking Q10, whether it's the type of, supplements you're on, whatever it is. There's things that you can start to notice that, like, hey, I'm moving in the right direction. With the light therapy, I wish there was more stuff, but I ended up relying a lot on just FDA ratings. So if the FDA's looked at that device, you can, and they have an actual rating, it's a 3B, it has a certain amount of power, right? You can then make an assumption that the company isn't totally fraudulent because they have bothered to get it rated, and that's a thing, right? And I wish the space was different, but it is what it is. So it behooves anybody who's in this to really look at the device and make sure it's doing what you think it's going to do. The doctor that I met with is a specialist in light therapy. He said, I like to think about the device as almost like the light is a needle. He's like, some needles are 5 inches long, right? Mm-hmm. And you can really go. And some of them don't even scratch the surface. I mean, they're literally, the tiniest 1 millimeter needle. And if you look at it that way, you go like, well, how deep is this light actually going? Then you'll have a lot of clarity on, hey, this belt that I bought for $17.99 on Amazon in no way is going to go 6 inches into my body and impact the mitochondria in my eggs.
Yeah.
And that's the part where I think the science will be a lot better, in 10 years or 20 years, but we're just not there yet. We don't have the framework yet, but we can't wait. We have to work.
This is it. Yeah. We have to work at what we have. I guess when I was a couple of months ago, kind of really looking at, okay, I really want to get into this area more because I've had my own experiences with the red light and lasers and seeing like really good results. And the more I looked at the fertility space and then looking at, there's so many products out there, but I kept coming back to the Giga laser and the fact that they've been in business a long time, because you see like every second day there's like 20 new companies that are selling a panel or some device that they say is going to do it for you and whatever that issue is. But it's I think because part of me is thinking, okay, is it better to get the $20 belt off Amazon and yeah, it might do something, especially for somebody who has like mitochondria is just starving for light. Mm-hmm. They might get an initial little bit of a bump, but I feel like now I'm at a point, try it, but if you can't afford these products, get out and get into the daylight and get early morning sunshine, get that near infrared in the morning and in the evening time. If you're in an area where you can and because near infrared penetrates the clothing and it'll penetrate the clouds and everything, respecting your circadian rhythm. And I think there's a lot of things that we can do if somebody cannot get access to a Giga laser or a 3B or even a level 4 laser. So for someone who is out there and they're just starting on this journey and they're trying to figure out, well, what other lifestyle changes should I be making? So for me, I'm like, get out, get the daylight, right, early in the morning, evening time, eating well, knocking the booze and everything else on the head. And
there were so many things that I discovered that were so healthy along the way that I think, again, going back to like, even if you don't have success, you can materially impact the quality of your life by working towards wellness, right? Like that there are things that are going to make you feel better for the rest of your life, regardless of whether or not you're able to have a child. And that's a very positive way of looking at this as a learning journey, right? So part of me was very much like, well, okay, if I can't have this child, then maybe I can help other people. Maybe I can at least, tell more women to harvest your eggs or freeze your eggs earlier if you don't want to feel this pressure when you're older. But one of the best things that I did was just learn about like what are the parts of me that don't feel healthy. So I used to have lots of sleeping problems, tons of sleeping problems. And I tried everything. I tried over-the-counter sleeping stuff. I tried Ambien. I gone to my doctor, all these things. Well, you know what worked was magnesium. Like, I was low in magnesium. And when I started taking magnesium every night before I went to bed, it fixed maybe 80% of my insomnia issues, right? And you think about, well, something just as simple as magnesium, but then look at the stats, right? Which I read later, and I was angry that no one had suggested this before. We're like 70% of the population or something insane is deficient in magnesium, right? So unless you're eating an insanely healthy organic diet from, crops that are not, grown in environments that are already depleted, you probably are low in this extremely essential nutrient, right? So give it a go. And I was very scientific about it. I would add them kind of one at a time a little bit, so that I could feel like, hey, is this something that seems like it's effective, or am I feeling healthier with this? When I added the magnesium, it fixed a lot of my sleeping issues. And I go, okay, well, melatonin is something related to fertility. My body was lacking in magnesium, which is a precursor to melatonin, along with a lot of other, hormones that you create. Now my body's able to make more melatonin. Well, that has to be helpful for everything in my body, in addition to infertility, right? And there was a lot of things like that. So I read a book called 𝒂𝒃𝒄𝒚'𝒔. It starts with the egg, which I thought was a fantastic book. I have it here. Ta-da.
Yeah, I've read it. It's really good. Yeah.
It's really good. And she talks about the science of this kind of stuff. So I went through and I started taking the Q10. I already knew my D was low because of my blood work. But if you haven't done a full blood work panel, do that just for your own health. Like, look at it and say, like, are my vitamin D levels optimal? Am I high in homocysteine? Like, do I have a lot of inflammation? What does my blood sugar look like? It's a lot of stuff, but it's for your health anyway. Like, if you have a blood sugar problem, you should know that, even if it doesn't have anything to do with your infertility, right? So getting a full blood work panel and getting the data, right, is huge, because then you can go, okay, I know I have a vitamin D issue. I know I have a sleep issue. Let me try different things that can help with my sleep. Let me, am I getting enough fish oil? Am I getting enough omegas? Probably not. I eat fish, but maybe once every week and a half. That's not enough. Right? So you can start kind of going through the list and being like, okay, I'm going to optimize all these things. And if this helps, great. But if not, I'm still healthier. And that for me was really big.
What I've seen, especially with the last couple of years, is more women giving themselves permission to go and do these tests independently. You can go to any of the little storefront labs and get your own panel, and they're not very expensive. Get your own panel so you have a baseline of what you're starting with before you start adding the CoQ10 and the vitamin D, and what I see in the kind of the biohacking community is they are so on the ball with their numbers. And I had, I've done a little of my own biohacking. Like, I got a continuous glucose monitor there a couple of months ago, just because I wanted to see what's happening when I eat, or is stress affecting my blood sugars. I think it's great to see, and you as well, advocating for, go get these tests and give yourself permission. You, as a woman, go empower yourself to get this information yourself, so that you have something that you're working with from the get-go. You have that baseline. And then go do your red light, and let's see what your CRP looks like, and your inflammation, and all of that good stuff as well. I think it's empowering to have that knowledge about your own body.
And you can't expect, and other countries are different, I can only speak to the US experience, but to expect your general practitioner or your OBGYN to in any way really think about this stuff, they don't have the time, they don't have the resources. I found it really helpful actually to look at some of these like sites, like biohacking kind of sites, where it's like these are the studies, right? This is the thing. Like I got books on longevity, like a Peter and Zella Outlive. Like these are
Yeah.
interesting things, right? And you read them and you go, oh wow, like I don't even know what my number is here. What's my, whatever. And you look at it and go, okay, this is something I should be taking charge of and knowing anyway. And one of the things I love about, at least, at least here is there's a lot of deals around Thanksgiving. So if you have, I actually have, and it's ridiculous, but I have a sticky note of all the products I'll be buying on Black Friday or Cyber Monday. So like if you're
Yeah.
budget conscious, right? And you go like, okay, do I want a way to track this better? Yes. So I'm looking at Inside Tracker. I'm looking at some of these other, bio sites where you kind of monitor your blood work or whatever. Well, I'm just going to wait. I'm going to wait to see what kind of Cyber Monday deal goes on because you can probably get a huge discount, right? And so I
Yes.
get all the
Yeah.
blood work, right? And then you wait for the sale and then you can plug it into their little system, right? And get
Yeah.
recommendations on what's going to help move your number. Now, in my case, I had a lot of struggle with my weight. I had gestational diabetes with my son. I've been borderline on that for a long time. I found intermittent fasting to be incredibly helpful for maintaining my weight and losing weight. I would do watch my intake of carbohydrates, but I would say absolutely, given my history, and a lot of women struggle with their weight, and that's part of their infertility journey. Be creative about that too, right? And look into whether it's intermittent fasting or some of the weight loss drugs that are available. There's things you can try, and it might not work for you, but it might,
Yeah.
and you won't know unless you just give it a go, and really, say, hey, I'm going to try fasting for, the next 2 months and see how this feels. And maybe you're going to get your sugars a little bit more under control, and maybe you'll lose a few pounds, and that could be a game changer when it comes to your goals with fertility, you know? And all that kind of comes into like that wellness thing. That's not
Yeah.
just the one thing. It's being healthy as a person.
Yeah, and long-term health. I guess at the moment, I think we're seeing so much in the media about, seed oils and American like diet and nutrition. It's a little different in Europe, but there's still high levels of obesity and metabolic health issues that are growing. But I think, yeah, you can't really turn on the TV without seeing something about, looking after your diet, more protein, less refined carbs. And because I do feel when you've been on this journey for a while, it can get kind of obsessive. If you have a partner, to have them kind of keeping an eye on you as well, because if you're at a point where it's like, okay, I have to get the 10,000 steps in, I have to get, so much protein in every meal, and that is creating an additional stressor, mind and body. So it's trying to find that middle ground of being able to let go of the reins a little bit and trust yourself and trust, my body is asking for something right now. So is this based on actual hunger? Is this because I'm bored or angry? Or I think it's important for if we have a partner just to keep an eye on us, because it can be more than obsessive. And
Yeah, that's very true.
which is around the nutrition and exercise, which has been such a focus. What advice would you offer someone who is feeling like it's too much?
Yeah. So I would say that very much having a mindset of I'm trying different things. I'm experimenting different things. Nobody has all the answers. I'm not going to find some magical wizard that is going to be able to explain all this to me. But I know how my body feels. I know how I'm sleeping at night. I know when I feel healthy and centered. Right? I know what kind of foods help me feel better and which ones make me feel worse. I know how to treat other people in my life with respect and kindness. I want to do that to myself. And just creating a vision, I think, of if this is the road you have to walk, you didn't pick it, you didn't pick this, you didn't pick infertility. But if this is the path I'm on, how can I do this as my best self? Right? Like, how can I do this in a way that is going to minimize the amount of suffering and hopefully get some value out of it, even if I don't end up with the child that I want at the end of that journey. And it takes a lot, and some days are definitely a lot harder than others. But if you go into it with like, if this is my path, I'll walk it the best I can. And you give yourself that space to do that, the space to experiment, the space to make some mistakes, keep that vision in front of you. Like I said, you're just writing down, like, this is how I want to approach it. Then I think you can endure longer. I think it doesn't have to cost quite as much. You don't have to look at those as last years of your life. I think some women do. I think it hurts so much that for some women, they literally feel like these were last years. And you should try to avoid that as much as you can. You deserve your full life, regardless of how this outcome, what the outcome is. You deserve to have happiness and health and wellness, regardless of where this ends up, you know?
Thank you, Elizabeth. That's even just aside from your experiences with the Giga Laser, the compassion that you show to everyone who messages you and looking for support and is really, really very generous, and I'm sure it does your heart as much good as it does to the women that you share your knowledge with, and that wisdom, doesn't come easily.
No,
It's hard earned.
it's earned, and it's a lot of years of learning with that. But that's what it is, right? So I appreciate it. I hope this is really useful. And if anyone ever does want more information, or they want to talk to somebody that's been there on both sides of it, then they're just welcome to reach out to me. I'm on Facebook, and then Red Light Community Group there, and I'm more than happy to help anyone who needs help.
Elizabeth, thank you so much. It was really lovely to chat to you. I appreciate you sharing. I think this is an episode I think I'm going to have to share with lots and lots of my clients, I think, who can really benefit from your insights on this journey. It's been really, really lovely.
I'm glad. I hope it's helpful to other people. It's certainly a lonely road, and it's one that merits respect, no matter what stage you're in with it and whatever the outcome. Any woman who goes through this should be so proud of herself and compassionate to herself, and just really, you're doing something amazing. What you do every day is literally just amazing.
Yeah. It takes huge amount of courage. For anyone listening, huge amount of courage to do this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was very nice to meet you.
You too, Elizabeth. I'm sure we will chat again, and I've no doubt you're probably going to have lots of people contacting you now for so be careful what you wish for.
That's all right. I'm happy to help. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. Remember, empowerment begins with knowledge. If you enjoyed our time together and want more content like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. So stay inspired, stay informed, and until next time, take care of yourself.